So I just got up and I saw Sargon's reflection video on his debate with, I think, Kristi Winters. Kristi Winters. And I watched the debate, and it didn't go so good for Sargon. And I just wanted to say why. Although I think on some level he knows, but he called for criticisms, and I'm happy to constructively criticize. So the problem was that Kristi Winters, with all the academic experience she has, did a much better job of framing the debate in a way that was fair to the question. And to get at exactly how this went down, I want to use an example. So let's consider the question for a debate: is refined sugar good for the world? Right. So the question for Sargon's debate was: is feminism good for the world? So let's just take a different question: is refined sugar good for the world? In parallel, Sargon would have gone on to condemn the last 50 years of high fructose corn syrup use and the resulting obesity epidemic in America. Kristi would have praised bread's ability, along with that of flour, cultivated honey, and other refined sugars, to effectively create settled civilization. So, as you may or may not know, it was the rise of agriculture, probably wheat farming, and other kinds of grain farming, that allowed human beings to become settled agriculturalists rather than hunter-gatherers. And so, because Sargon was in the debate so focused on a narrow subset of feminism, which is currently toxic, he completely overlooked the bulk of feminism, which is widely accepted to be non-toxic. Now, it just so happens that if you actually look, to go back to our example, if you actually look at the beginning of civilization, once you rule out infant mortality, hunter-gatherers were healthier than agriculturalists. They were taller, they had better teeth, they had fewer diseases. Really, the only thing that agriculturists could do better is breed faster, and that's why they won. But my point here is that just like settled life was in many ways worse than the life of a hunter-gatherer once you get past the issue of infant mortality, so too even first-wave feminism doesn't quite withstand the scrutiny that you'd like. I myself am torn on this question because I do think that men and women should try and move towards a situation of greater equality. And this means that women should vote. However, first-wave feminism managed to achieve the franchise for women without exposing them to the liability of the draft, for example. And so I would portray feminism as toxic because it creates a situation of unfairness, of institutionalized unfairness between men and women, where prior arrangements, again, if you look at the coverture laws that were in place before the 1900s, these were they kind of aimed to balance the power versus responsibility that each gender had. I'm not saying that this is good. I think it's probably quite bad. A man should not be held to account for the sins of his wife or his sons or his fathers. But I think that there was an intentional balance aimed at that we're missing now. And we see it in the way that many women, for example, want to have the same pay as a man who in fact works, 30% more. They want maternity leave, but they also want to be paid the same as a man who would never take maternity leave. That is, they want to make the same number of dollars. It's insufficient somehow to be paid the same rate for hourly work. And so I would distinguish, or in that debate, I would have distinguished the urge to equality that, frankly, drove men to support first wave feminism and second wave feminism, and to some extent third wave feminism, I would separate that drive for equality from feminism itself. Right? Feminism itself is an agent, it's an ideological agent to advantage women, almost always, even from the beginning, at the expense of men. It always sought women's advantage without the corresponding responsibilities that men have always had to bear. And that's not the same thing as seeking equality. And I think Karen does probably the best job with this. But just pointing out that, no. In fact, life was pretty good as a hunter-gatherer. Life was pretty good before feminism. And all the things that feminism gave us are not the same things that people who sought equality would give us. Anyway, so that's just my my quick takeaway. There's other issues, and I think that she was quite dishonest during parts of the debate, using news stories that do not actually support her points if you look more deeply into them and things like that. But the reason why you lost, Sargon, is because she framed the question in a way that was more appropriate to the actual wording of the question, which is not to say that she had to win, because it is possible to attack what feminism has done over its lifetime and to separate that from what someone who wants equality would have done. Just a few more things. When you're framing this, you have to define two things, right? Feminism, first of all, needs to get defined. And good, right? Good for the world also needs to be defined. And I'm not sure that either of you did that, but if any of you did, Kristi did in a much better way. What does good for the world mean? For example, it's an interesting question. If women today are unhappier than they were before feminism, then has feminism done a good job? In other words, it's not obvious that just because women have more rights, de jure, in law, it's not obvious that that's a good thing if we measure the effectiveness or the goodness of feminism by women's happiness, right? In that case, it would be a bad thing. And so even if you accept everything Kristi says as gospel, which of course we shouldn't, without a definition of good for the world, right? Does that mean people are happier? Does it mean they have more legal rights? Does it mean they're more productive? Does it mean they live more fulfilling lives? Right? What does that mean? You have to take the content, or you have to define the content of good for the world. You can't just accept it without speech. And again, Sargon, this is why it's so important that you understand your own ideological lenses, because your ideological lenses tell you what good for the world means. And Kristi can quite reasonably not share those ideological lenses. The best kind of debate on this topic is one where you're trying to force her, with your words, to put on your glasses and trying to take hers off. Anyway, yeah. So, two essential components here, of course, right? Just to sum up, in any debate like this, you must establish which interpretation of the question is relevant before you do anything else. Otherwise, you'll talk past each other and it'll be a mess. And two, your interpretation has to jive with the question. You have to show the connection between your interpretation and the way that the actual question is worded. She did a better job because feminism does not simply refer to the last 25 years of toxic bullshit that's come out of academia. It refers to a much longer history, which is established in people's mind to be largely good, even if that's not true. The history of feminism can be separated from the history of equality. I don't believe the two are the same thing. And if you examine the historical record on things like coverture and the draft and workplace equality and all these things, I think it becomes very, very clear that feminism is not a force for equality. It's a force that advances women's interests above those of men. And last, very, very important to take some time and define your terms. Good for the world. Is feminism good for the world? What does good for the world mean? Does it mean women are happier? Does it mean they have more jobs? Does it mean that, I don't know, more people do headstands and laugh upside down? I don't know, right? Good for the world is very vague. And so that needs to be defined as precisely as practical, really, for the debate to make any sense at all. And that didn't really happen. Certainly, Sargon, it didn't happen to your favor. Anywho, thanks for listening. I hope someone listens to this. It's just a quick response. But, get them next time. No worries. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.